Good afternoon, everyone. This is Delegate Derek Davis. I'm Chairman of the House Economic Matters Committee. I am pleased to be before everyone today. We'd ask that everyone please mute yourself as we go about the hearing. We're going to start off with a discussion on
Chairman, you've muted yourself.
I saw that. Forgive me. We're going to start with the National Conference of State Legislatures. Is it Mr. Herman, Zach Herman, representing NCSL? We welcome you to Maryland and the House Economic Matters Committee. I also want to welcome our colleague from the Senate, Senator Kathy Klossmeyer, and I see we have Kiefer Mitchell, former member of Economic Matters, currently the Governor's Chief Legislative Liaison. So these are some of our guests we have today. But without further ado, Mr. Herman, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Davis, and thank you to the committee at large for inviting me to come speak. I have a couple of slides to share. But before I do that, I wanted to just provide a brief overview of who NCSL is. We are a membership organization serving you, the lawmakers in every state, and your staff. We're a nonpartisan, bipartisan organization. So that means that we do not take policy positions. We do not advocate for specific laws or policy solutions. We instead just provide the research and overview of what states are doing nationally. We also do not write or endorse any model legislation. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, I can't, but I can reference you to the slides that have been shared with you. I have 4 slides related to states that are currently planning to opt out of the 3 main federal unemployment programs, temporary federal unemployment programs. So the first slide is looking at states that are opting out of FPUC, which is the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Program. This is the program that was initially created in the CARES Act that provided $600 extra a week to recipients of unemployment insurance. That $600 expired in July. It was then reinstituted as a $300 program through an executive order in FEMA, and then reinstituted again in a budget extension in the Senate. And then the American Rescue Plan Act extended it until the first week in September. So states that are opting out of this program are opting out before the September deadline. Currently, there are 25 states, so the slides that you have are up to date as of the end of May, and then in June, Maryland also announced that they would be opting out of the program in July, early July. So the slides that you have are off by 1 state. They're missing Maryland for states opting out of FPUC. There are more states opting out of just this extra $300 a week than there are states opting out of all 3 programs. If you look at the next slide, you'll see states that are opting out of all 3 programs, the 3 major programs. The CARES Act had several other programs, but the 3 main ones that are notable are the $300 a week FPUC, the Pandemic Extended Unemployment Compensation, or PEUC, or Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, PEUC. This is a federal extended benefits program for people who exhaust existing unemployment benefits. And then Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA. This is commonly known as the Gig Worker Assistance or Independent Contractor Assistance. We currently know of 19 or 20 states that are opting out of this. Your map has 19, and Maryland announced in early this month that they will also be opting out of these programs. So there are 20 states. Maryland is not included on that map. Next, you'll see states that are reinstating their work search requirements. These are states that have either completely reinstated them or plan to reinstate them. One of the provisions of the early stimulus funding in 2020 was that it allowed states the flexibility to waive all or most of their work search requirements in unemployment insurance. Unemployment insurance generally requires that as a condition of eligibility that you were able, available, and actively seeking work. During height of lockdowns, it was kind of difficult for people to be actively seeking work, and so states were given the flexibility to waive those requirements for recipients. The states did that on sort of a staggered schedule and are now almost every state waived those requirements.
Mr. Herman.
Yes.
We're just to check, and maybe I'm missing it. Did you have a slide presentation you think you were showing?
No, I tried to share my slides and was unable to. I'm
Oh,
referencing
okay.
the handouts.
Oh,
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for
got
that
you.
clarification. Yes, I'm referencing the handouts. I'm talking about the third slide in the handouts, or the third page in the PDF now. Thank you, Chairman. So states that are beginning to reinstate these work search requirements, what each work search requirement is looks a little bit different depending on the state, but they're slowly the bulk of states have trickled in and reinstated these requirements or plan to by the middle of summer. Then finally, you'll see a fourth page, and this is states that are offering what are colloquially called return to work bonuses. Oh, excellent. Thank you. So currently we know of about 4 states that are offering these return to work bonuses. This is by no means a comprehensive list. This particular topic in general is a little bit difficult to track. Some of these announcements come out sort of immediately, and it's hard to know exactly where to look all the time. So this is by no means a comprehensive list. But we know about 4 states that are offering these bonuses. The eligibility for these bonuses varies across states. So some of them partial return to work or part-time employment qualifies. For others, it has to be full-time work. And the amount of money given also varies. Some of the states that are offering it are also not opting out of the federal programs, and the others that are opting out of federal programs are also offering these return to work bonuses. Thank you again, Chairman, and the committee. That is my presentation, and I am open to any other questions from the committee.
Mr. Herman, thank you so much, and I'll certainly check to see if the members have questions. But I was curious. That last slide you just showed, I don't know if we can go back to it or not, but I was wondering, because I was going to ask the question and you beat me to it, but then I wanted to expound upon it a little bit. You said some of the states that are offering the bonuses, they did not cut the benefits. Let me make sure I got that correct as well.
Correct. So Colorado and Connecticut are not opting out of the benefits, but they are offering a return to work bonus. Arizona, Montana, New Hampshire, and Oklahoma are opting out of some or all of the benefits, and they're also offering a return to work bonus. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. The ones that are offering benefits, I don't know if there's an answer to that. Is that coming out of the funds coming out of the American Rescue Plan, or is that coming out, I guess, their general fund budgets?
I cannot answer the specifics on that, but I can research that and respond for you, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much. Guys, do any of you all have questions? I'm still, you know how I am with this technology, so make sure I see you if you want to be seen. I do see Delegate Howard and then Delegate Fennell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, you said that the federal portion of the benefits lapsed in June?
Thank you, Delegate. So partially, yes. So the initial FPUC was $600 out of the CARES Act. That expired in July. Then there was a sort of semi-replacement program that came out of an executive order through the Trump administration, through FEMA.
And that's the heart of what I was getting to, is the fact that the $600 federal benefit didn't just lapse, it also lapsed and was not taken up by Congress, and the $300 extension was taken up by President Biden. So it went from 600 to 300, but it only went to 300 based on an executive order because the Congress didn't even take up the issue of extending the $600 federal benefit at the time. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that is the order of how things came out.
Delegate Fennell.
Okay, thank you. My question is in a similar line in reference to the federal government is still offering the $300 to trickle down to the effect to the state. Is that true?
Pardon me, Delegate. Are you asking if the federal government is still providing funds for those programs?
Yes, that's the question.
So if a state opts out of it, my understanding is that they then do not have access to those funds.
That's fine. That wasn't my question. My question is the federal government is still offering it no matter Right, that's my question.
Thank you, Delegate. Yes, they are still offering it. The program is run between a mutual agreement between the state and the Federal Department of Labor. And so the funds are still there and available until the first week
Okay.
of September.
Thank you, and that's what I wanted to hear. You said it was available. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
Delegate Charcuti.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering if NCSL has had a chance to look into this question. I think we're still waiting for the Attorney General's response on our request to this. But is there an opinion or an understanding about whether or not the decision to keep these funds flowing through the state is at the sole discretion of the governor? Or if a legislature, if it chose to convene an act, if it would have an opportunity to override that decision. I know it's been done primarily by governors in most of these states, and depending on the state, the legislature may or may not in those states be interested in exploring that, but I'm just wondering from a legal and structural perspective if you have insight into that question.
Thank you, Delegate. I unfortunately do not.
Thank you.
Delegate, by the way, Delegate Adams, since this is the first time we've gotten together since Sonny died, congratulations on your appointment. I think ECM now has both of the House's whips, so that ought to be interesting. But Delegate Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is exciting to be on the committee with you, and I'll always mind myself the way I've always done, which is try to be beneficial to the committee. So thank you for that. So to NCSL, just, obviously this is a national conversation, and I suppose I would ask you in follow-up to Delegate Fennell's point, which this is a federal, program that are administered by the states.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The Biden administration has basically said that they're not going to continue this much further. Do you have a sense as to what this map might look like 90 days from now? In other words, and I actually don't know the answer to this specifically, but when is the federal government going to say that these sort of benefits are going to sunset? And then that leads to, what do you think these maps will look like in the next few months?
Thank you for the question. I unfortunately do not know or have a prediction. All I can say with certainty is that these benefits are set to expire in the first week of September.
Thank you.
Delegate Mount.
Oh, thank you, Chairman. Zach, for specifically the first chart, the extra $300, but the other program. Let me rephrase it. Just for the $300 program, the extra $300 payment. I don't know if this question is best for you or for our Department of Labor, but do you know if that extra $300 has any impact on our unemployment trust fund in Maryland?
Are you pardon me, Delegate, are you asking if those payments are coming out of your trust fund?
Yeah, they have any impact on the liquidity or the level of funding that's in our trust fund?
Thank you for the question. I think that your Department of Labor can answer more specifically, but I will say that currently FPUC is federally funded.
Okay, thank you.
The specifics I do not have access to.
Senator Klossmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Mr. Herman, I was just wondering, the states that have taken away the federal money, are there any statistics that show, or is there any data that shows whether or not their jobs are getting filled and unemployment is going down? Is there anything, do we have anything like that?
Thank you, Senator. So currently I'm unaware of any research on that or statistics on that one way or the other.
Yeah, because it seems like I hear the stories all the time, but they're always kind of anecdotal and so I'm not sure where we're at on the whole thing. So, okay, thanks.
Delegate Charcuti, is that left over from last one or you want to follow up? Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Herman. You do not have your slides. I don't know, Laura, if you have them or not. But if not, if it's okay, I'd like for us to get a copy of the slides, and certainly we'll distribute it to the members as well. Delegate Fennell, were you trying to get back in? Muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just saying, when I was asking the question earlier in reference to it, and not beating up on, anyone, in reference to the availability, we have the availability of the monies now, and it's going to be stopped. Isn't we giving $1.5 billion back? Just somebody answer that question.
I can answer it. From the information that we've been provided, I'm hearing figures between 1.3 and 1.5. That's what the information that's been provided to me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much.
If not, thank you very much, Mr. Herman. We will end there. We certainly appreciated that. Was helpful. And at this point in time, I'd like to transition to Secretary Robinson and Mr. Mitchell. Welcome, Secretary Robinson.
Thank you, Chairman Davis. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
And see me okay?
Absolutely. We've gotten a lot better at this than the first time or this time last year, so we're all good.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the ECM. Kiefer Mitchell, Chief Legislative Officer for Governor Hogan, and my role is to answer any questions as it pertain to the governor, but I'm going to turn the presentation over to Secretary Robinson and her team. I'm sorry, my camera's not working. I don't know if you all control the camera, but I understand if you don't want to see my face.
No, this technology stuff comes and goes, so we certainly understand. Madam Secretary.
Thank you, Chairman Davis and Vice Chair Dumais and members of the committee. I wanted to mention before we kick this off that I also have my Assistant Secretary, Dana Freeman, from our Division of Unemployment Insurance available today. So we anticipate questions, and we're happy to answer those questions at the end of my presentation. We did submit slides. Were you going to, there we go. Thank you. I only have 5 slides, so I don't want anyone to think this is going to be a really long presentation. We want to make sure you have time to ask, and we have time to answer your questions today. So if you want to slide right, there's just to the next slide, and we will jump right into a quick overview just to put things in context as to how we got where we are. I think it's really important to highlight the fact that we have paid over $12.3 billion in benefits to date under all unemployment insurance programs during the pandemic. That is, those numbers are since March of 2020. It's quite historical. We are proud to say that 97% of all complete claims have been processed by the department, and only 3% of those claims are pending adjudication for an initial determination. Those are the claims that have not received payment because they are pending adjudication. We still are dealing with rampant fraud in the system, as is every state in the nation. We work very closely every single day of the week with our federal partners and the U.S. Attorney's Office and state police to continue to investigate the fraudulent claims. I'm happy to tell you that over 89% of all claims flagged and investigated in our system are confirmed as fraudulent. That's a really high number, and it really kind of emphasizes the need for us to continue to watch the fraud, and the fraudsters are very smart and they change their tactics on a daily and weekly basis. We do the same thing in our system in order to catch them. And following all the best practices across the country that we've learned and working with the federal task force on fraud. That being said, I'll move right into some additional good numbers, which relate to the unemployment rate in Maryland, which has remained at 6.2%. We gained 3,800 jobs in the month of April. This is the 12th consecutive month of job growth in Maryland. And since the beginning of this year, 2021, we've gained a total of 27,700 jobs.
It's your
bit
camera.
of a milestone is that more than 250,000 jobs have been regained in Maryland since the pandemic low. And maybe most important right now is that as of June 6th, there are 141,181 unique online job postings for jobs available in Maryland right now. And keep in mind, a single job posting often advertises for multiple positions. This is the number of the unique postings. And also, many industries use alternative methods of advertising, such as social media, signage, and word of mouth. Particularly, the restaurant industry advertises this way as they have high turnover. So if we can move to the next slide, you invited us here today to give an overview of the recent announcement and the discontinuation of the federal benefits. So I will just recap for you that on June 1st, the governor announced that Maryland will discontinue our enhanced pandemic federal unemployment benefits. And labor has been and will be in consistent communication with our claimants about the changes that are coming, particularly towards in the next few weeks as we get to July 3rd when the federal benefits end, and the following week when our work search requirements are reinstated. Claimants will no longer be able to submit new applications for the federal programs after the end date of Saturday, July 3rd. That's the end of a benefit week, which is what every state did, so that we're not worried with any claimants' benefits messing them up in the middle of a benefit week. We opted out in Maryland of the 4 federal enhanced compensation programs. I think Zach did a good job of kind of giving you an overview, so I won't belabor that point, but the PUA is the independent contractor self-employed benefits. Those were made available originally by the CARES Act for claimants who have never been eligible for unemployment insurance benefits before. The pandemic emergency unemployment compensation, of course, is the extended weeks added on to the regular period of benefits. The federal pandemic unemployment compensation, or FPUC, is that extra $300 that gets added to each weekly benefit amount. And the mixed earners unemployment compensation program, that is the program where a regular unemployment insurance claimant can receive $100 extra per week if they can prove that they also had self-employed or independent contractor work in addition to their regular work, regular unemployment work, or workforce work connected to an employer in their base period. So the FPUC and the MEUC kind of are lumped in with the other benefit packages. So what actions do claimants need to take? The last week that our Maryland claimants will be able to file a weekly claim certification for the 4 federal programs listed above is that week ending July 3rd. So that means they file their weekly certification the following week for the preceding benefit week. That means they must file their final required weekly claim certification in their Beacon portal anytime from Sunday, July 4th through Saturday, July 10th to receive payment for that last week ending July 3rd of these federal programs. And very important to note is that if any claimant is waiting to receive an eligibility determination for any of these programs, and if they are determined to be eligible even after July 3rd, they will receive all benefit payments owed to them for any of those weeks prior to and ending July 3rd. The department will process every single claim for all of those weeks, and that money is available to us to pay those claims no matter when the eligibility determination is depicted. So we can move to the next slide. The very next week, right on the heels of the discontinuation of the federal programs, our regular unemployment insurance claimants will begin to search for work. You may remember this was a standard requirement in the unemployment insurance program prior to the pandemic. And as Zach mentioned as well, every state in the nation waived these requirements when businesses were closed and the labor market was not in a position for people to be actively searching for work. So in Maryland, beginning the week of July 4th, we will reinstate the standard requirements for claimants to search for work, but it's going to be a little bit more flexible than it was pre-pandemic. Our claimants will be required to complete 3 re-employment activities each week to maintain their eligibility for their benefits. There are a variety of reemployment activities that claimants can complete to satisfy these requirements and be determined eligible on a continuing basis. Our Division of Workforce Development and Adult Learning currently has 30 different offerings that claimants can complete to satisfy this requirement. 18 of those are self-guided and online, and 12 of them are staff assisted. So to give you some examples, pre-pandemic, the requirements were that a claimant must apply for 3 jobs each week. We've made this requirement more flexible because we believe there are lots of different ways we can help prepare claimants to re-enter the workforce. And sometimes they need different skills and tools. So one of the 3 requirements for our claimants will be that they need to apply for at least 1 job. However, the other 2 reemployment activities can be something like completing a virtual job interview, or completing a workshop at our American Job Centers, or attending a job fair, or going through a resume writing workshop. Or we have a new module in our system for the Maryland Workforce Exchange that allows claimants to get real-time feedback on mock interview questions. These are all things that claimants can do to satisfy those requirements and keep their eligibility for benefits going forward, help them get connected to a job and back in the workforce. So across the board, states that have restored work search requirements have seen improvements in employment rates and a decrease in the overall unemployment insurance rate. I know there was a question earlier about that, so we're happy to share a little bit of data that we have. In particular, Ohio is one that has a 4.7% unemployment insurance rate. Its neighbors, Pennsylvania and Illinois, which have not reinstated the work search requirements, have unemployment insurance rates of 7.4 and 8.2. Ohio is one state that eliminated the work search waiver for most claimants back in December. So we see this state faring better long-term, but we also saw that an immediate decrease in unemployment after reinstating this requirement. This fares true for many of the West Coast states that have not reinstated the work search requirement, as compared to another state like Missouri, which did reinstate work search requirements early. And the month after they did so, their unemployment insurance rate decreased by 2.1%. Missouri is actually getting really close to pre-pandemic unemployment insurance rates. So I hope that gives you an answer to that earlier question and a little bit of information about what's happening in other states. We can move to the next slide. And I just want to touch on all of the resources that we have available at the Department of Labor, and with your partnership, things that we've been able to do even during the pandemic to make sure we have resources available and we are connecting our claimants to jobs and skills training. During this pandemic, I think everyone has heard a lot about our apprenticeship programs. We are really proud that we approved 27 brand new apprenticeship programs during the pandemic while we were operating primarily virtually. I think it's pretty amazing, and I'm very proud of my team for doing that work. We have increased apprenticeship tremendously in Maryland and recently surpassed that record-breaking 11,000 apprentices. This is really important because as people are getting back into the workforce, we have all these opportunities for them to learn new skills in industries and earn money while they are doing that. More importantly, we in a partnership between Governor Hogan and Senate President Bill Ferguson and House Speaker Adrian Jones, I think we all are aware of the big bipartisan budget agreement where we dedicated $75 million in federal funding to a variety of apprenticeship and employment training programs. We're so happy that we did that because now is the time when our customers and our employees across the state need this additional funding. We are in the process and have allocated that money through our local workforce areas so that they can best determine the needs of their jurisdiction and of their job seekers for what skills and training they need to be connected to, and making sure that they are aware of the job so that they're getting the skills to meet the job needs in that jurisdiction. So thank you for that additional money. We have not seen going into workforce development in Maryland in a long time. We can move to the last slide.
To build something new, something. Hold on, we got to do something about Veronica's. Thank you. I'm sorry, Madam Secretary.
No worries. If we can move to the last slide, I'll just share a little bit more about the resources we are offering. In terms of recruitments and job fairs, our regional business consultant team, along with all of our WIOA partners across the state, have held over 419 recruitment events since last March. And we've had over 4,000 job seekers attending those events. We have 21 events currently planned for June and July, and even more, closer to 30 in the planning stages. Those are job fairs, and oftentimes best practices show that we are working with a small group of employers at one time in certain industries so that they can really have that opportunity to connect with the job seeker and connect them with jobs and find out what training is needed so that we can bridge that gap for our customers. Of course, we have 30 American Job Centers in every single county across the state, working with our job seekers and providing a full range of both in-person and virtual services. I mentioned some of those in the list of work search requirements that people will be able to choose from. But there's a whole host of services available within our job centers. Some job centers, like Baltimore City, are already taking in-person appointments. All of our state-run job centers will be having in-person services starting at the beginning of July. And every jurisdiction that we work with the county in conjunction, we are working with them over the next few weeks to make sure we can provide as many in-person and virtual, because we know we've learned so much from technology over this past year. So we don't want to take that away from any of our customers. We're just going to be able to provide both and reach more customers in a short amount of time. And of course, we really love our apprenticeship locator. Our customers love it too, because job seekers can go online and search for apprenticeship programs by county, occupation, industry, and sponsor. We find that that's really helpful for our customer to learn about where the opportunities are, and then we can work with them and their local workforce area to get them connected to those opportunities as well. And we hope that everyone knows about the work sharing unemployment insurance program by this point. It's a flexible reopening strategy that employers can use to bring back their employees. And as they successfully reopen for business, employees can work at reduced hours while collecting partial unemployment benefits to make up a portion of the lost wages. And if you have not seen our TV commercials as a result of our partnership with Maryland Public Television, or if you've not heard our radio ads about the expanded work sharing program, we'd be happy to share those videos with you, because we know we're reaching a lot of customers in that way as well. So with that, I'm going to stop, and I'm sure you have questions. So myself, Kiefer Mitchell, and my Assistant Secretary, Dana Freeman, are happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'll get to the members in just a little bit. I wanted to ask a couple of questions myself, if I may. The first, I guess, being, and without getting into a philosophical or policy type deal, the fact of the matter is that we, I believe the decision to end the benefits early, I think it was more or less stated by the governor that, you know, that we have a critical worker shortage issue. So I guess what I would ask, and I'm curious, based upon the NCSL presentation, do we have a carrot and a stick approach? Obviously, you know, the stick approach was to end the benefits, but there was discussion that some of the other states offered like these bonuses. Has that been part of the dialogue, whether or not we would go that route in much the same way we've offered sort of bonuses, or not really bonuses, but a lottery type system with the vaccinations? Have we thought of maybe doing a carrot approach as well?
Well, I'm guessing Mr. Mitchell might want to weigh in if he takes himself on mute, but I will just kick that.
Yeah, I'll take.
Yeah, I just wanted to kick off the answer by saying that we were happy to work with the legislature on adding that workforce funding and having this joint bipartisan budget agreement. But I'll kick that question over for Kiefer.
Thank you, Secretary. And Mr. Chairman, let me just first take a quick stab at the question in terms of, touching on the why now. There were a number of reasons that the governor chose the July 3rd cutoff date. First, there have been 6.3 million vaccines distributed, which equals to about 71% of the adults. The positivity rate continues to set record lows. And in fact, 18 jurisdictions are under 2%. And these were signs that the governor saw as it relates to the state emerging from this pandemic. Also, the governor's traveled around the state, and as he's been traveling around the state, he hears numerous people, business owners, who are trying to reopen their businesses to full capacity. And he's heard countless times how it's been difficult for them to hire their workers and to get businesses fully up and running. The other piece is that the governor is joining 24 other states to end the federal enhancement program. And within the last week, the Biden administration has said that, it is in the purview of the governors. They're choosing to end the enhanced benefit. It's important to not, so that it doesn't get lost, that the governor's not ending unemployment benefits. Unemployment benefits are still available to those who qualify. The other piece I wanted to touch on in terms of the NCSL presentation and why Maryland isn't doing what Colorado's doing or what some of the other states are doing. Secretary Robinson alluded to it in her slide presentation that, of all the workforce programs and the apprenticeship programs that the governor was on the forefront in terms of establishing early on during the pandemic. This past session, because of the leadership of the governor and the leadership of Speaker Jones and President Ferguson, we worked together to reach a very historic budget deal and agreement that provided $75 million dedicated to apprenticeship and employment training. That's on top of the historic Relief Act of 2021 that this legislature worked on with the governor to get passed. To remind my former colleagues and the members of the committee that Relief Act provided tax exemptions on unemployment benefits, $7 million in workforce training, $500 in stimulus checks for those who were eligible, and those folks were those who qualified for the earned income tax credit, and expanded the earned income tax refundable credit. So those are basically the main reasons why the governor chose now as we move forward in what we are doing currently.
Thanks, Kiefer. Listen, you and I have had a conversation, so I'm not going to, get into a back and forth. I would just offer the flip side of it, not so much for you to respond, but just sort of for me to put the flip side of it. It wasn't just the workers, though, that have benefited. I know that we talked about the 1.5 billion that's going or that's being forfeited, but we're not forfeiting the 1.1 billion in unemployment insurance taxes that we're helping the businesses. So I think for me, I guess the part where I, went off the deep end was that I saw it as a situation of where, we were helping workers and businesses. Again, with the we were able to keep businesses out of table F and in a table C with that 1.1 billion in federal dollars. So my thing was, and I was more furious with the business folks because I knew what had happened. They start telling on each other once it got hot. And so if you're getting something, you shouldn't be going after someone else's safety net when yours is still there. You're not asking, you meaning them, they weren't asking for that assistance with the unemployment insurance, their tax payments. They weren't asking for that to be taken away. They were asking for those of the recipients. And I just sort of have a problem with that. It's a little disingenuous on their part to make that claim. But I guess the last part of it that I was thinking more so was that I guess I get it if the program still had another 6-9 months to go, but by the time it ends on July 3rd, we only had 2 more months to go anyway. And considering, you know, the issues that we had at the very beginning, it just felt like we owed them, you know, we owed them better than to, you know, struggle out the gate. And I get the problems weren't just the department's fault. Nobody could have expected that kind of crush, and there's no way we could hire staffing quick enough to deal with it. But nevertheless, we had the responsibility, however unfair it was, and it was difficult, but they sort of rode with us as we got that straightened out and you know, got the system improved, if not perfect. But it just sort of seemed like to me, we probably should have, you know, since we told it was announced when it was going to end, and then we switched the dates up on them, that's sort of where my issue sort of came in. I felt we could have waited 2 more months. So that's me explaining myself. Again, I'm not asking you to defend or whatever the decision. That's something that, you know, if I ever had a chance to talk with the governor, though, that's what I would have said to him in terms of why I got upset. But we've heard enough from me. I know the members are here. They have constituents as well. I'm going to do the best I can, guys, to see the order, but there are a lot of hands up. So I've got to, I'm just going to sort of go across the rows. I'm going to go Delegate Wilson first, Delegate Charkoudian, Delegate Adams, and then Delegate Aarons, and then I'll pick up after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colleagues, this question is for Mrs. Robinson. You began your presentation, you were talking about the percentage of fraud. Firstly, do you have a number of total claims that were flagged? And what percentage of it is that of the entire number of claimants?
Yep, thank you, Delegate Wilson. I don't have all of the data that changes every single week memorized. But if you give me a minute, I do have that number. In terms of fraud, as of May 24th, the total number of claims that has been flagged is 878,306 claims. So as I mentioned, 89% of all of those claims flagged have been confirmed as fraudulent. Did that answer your question?
And what percentage of that of the total amount of claims that we have dealt with?
Total amount of claims is right around 1.8 million at this point.
So a little more, my math is horrible. At least a third of all claims filed have been fraudulent.
Yes, and Delegate, I can share with you something that we're learning. We recently, we went through a competitive procurement for a fraud vendor to help us kind of sanitize the claims coming in even more extensively, and to get through the identity verification in a more automated, faster manner. We were happy about a week or two ago to select LexisNexis as our vendor that's working on that. And even in the first week or two that they have been on board, they have had a chance to work a high number, about 200,000 plus claims through their process, which connects with every credit reporting bureau, an entire algorithm of ways that they can confirm or deny the identities of claimants, and confirm whether a claimant is fraudulent or not. And what we have learned in a preliminary report is that 65% of all claims filed over the past 4 weeks are likely fraudulent. We have flagged the majority of those, as we do in our system, just like the 800,000 that I mentioned. But when I said fraud is rampant, it is not going away, and many many states are being hit harder than others. So we have to stay on top of that.
and I understand the seriousness of the fraud. I was just trying to get my mind wrapped around actual percentages. And I asked that. So when you say fraud, do you mean fraud as in individuals that like that are putting out their real name and address, but actually have a job? Or are we talking about the majority of the fraud is due to identification issues?
Correct. That's a very accurate assessment of, and it's important to clarify that there are two different types of fraud. We always in the system have had the type of fraud when a claimant might be working and earning wages while collecting unemployment benefits. The fraud that I'm talking about is stolen identities. These are identities that have been stolen, purchased off the dark web, and we know that there are foreign actors, there are fraudsters across the country and across the world that are using those identities that they have obtained illegally over the past several years to file unemployment insurance benefits in the name in the names that they have stolen. When they have the correct name, social security number, and birth date, it goes right through the Social Security Administration system and gets validated. So states like Maryland and others have had to ramp up our own systems and work with all of our federal partners and create multiple levels of triggers in our own system. And that's how we have been so successful at flagging all of those claims as fraudulent.
And I'm trying to get as quick as I can through this. I know I have other colleagues, because my issue is when you say fraud and people hear fraud, they don't hear identity theft. They hear the welfare queen, the old welfare queen of the 80s, that, oh, there are people that can work but don't want to work. And that's what's problematic about the approach when we keep talking about that number of fraud. We're not delineating or clarifying just what that fraud is, because it sounds more like hijacking. It sounds like truly a systemic issue that is our burden. Not that there are individuals out there who can work but aren't, and are taking this free money. And is that a fair assessment as it stands right now?
So both types of fraud exist.
I understand that, but
the identity fraud is a new issue that has come along with the federal enhanced benefit programs.
Correct.
They are streamlined and more accessible, and it's extra money, and especially the allowance for claimants to obtain those benefits based on an estimated income for a self-employed. That's why we're seeing the identity theft, and I think we have made that pretty clear in our press releases that this is identity theft fraud. So we will certainly make sure we are talking about that in the proper way, and we are doing everything we can. I just want to make sure we're on the record and everyone understands we're doing everything in our power to maintain the integrity of this system. That's really important for our customers. Because
once the federal money goes away, well, sounds like it already has, unfortunately, we're still going to be left with the same system to be taken advantage of. So I would love to hear offline or another time what exactly we're going to do to ensure that we don't continue to have these breaches and breaks.
Well, to be clear, there's no breach in the system and there's no break. These are when someone has all of the stolen identity information of a person, they use that information to file what looks like a very legitimate claim.
I understand.
So the fact that we're flagging such a large majority of those fraudulent claims mean we're doing something very right.
Okay.
Continue to do that, but we fully anticipate, as our federal partners do, that the fraud will be decreased significantly when these federal programs end.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this question is for Mr. Mitchell. It's good to see your face now. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for the presentation, Secretary Robinson. I do want to understand a little more about the policy basis on which the sort of actual macroeconomic theory and policy basis on which this decision was made. And I'd like to highlight a couple things and ask you to respond, because when the decision was made, I was appalled on many levels, but I wanted to understand what the economics actually tells us. And I was able to find two research documents, actual sophisticated quantitative econometric research, not I walked around and businesses told me they think this is why people aren't coming in for hiring. And so the first was done at the University of Chicago, and this used the sort of natural experiment that we had last year with the PUA benefits. And it looked at this question of a lot of economic models suggest that the additional money is both good for the macroeconomic stimulatory effect, but also that it may have this effect of people being less likely to go back to work. And I'm going to read what the actual conclusions were for you. So this is the one from the University of Chicago economists. We find that spending responds more than predicted, while job search responds an order of magnitude less than predicted. So simple job search models predict a sharp decline in search in the wake of substantial benefit expansions following by a rebound. We instead find that the job finding rate is quite stable. Second, there was this article done by the National Bureau of Economic Research. And similarly, this is a different set of data, similar research. And what they found was that states with more generous unemployment insurance, also specific to the pandemic, states with more paycheck protection programs and more generous unemployment insurance benefits had milder declines and faster recoveries. We find no evidence that a high UI replacement rates drove job losses or slowed rehiring. So what this tells me, and I looked further to see if there was other research that was done, again, actual research. I looked to see if there was other research that was done that was inconclusive or went in the other direction. I wasn't able to find any. And so I guess I'm wondering if you can speak to whether or not the governor actually considered economic research that was done in this comprehensive way, looking at these specific kinds of issues, or it sounds like it was much more anecdotal when you described his decision. Can you speak to that? I think you're muted. You're muted, Kiefer.
I'm still learning technology. Okay. I apologize. Thank you, Delegate, for the question. Obviously, I don't have the reports that you have, but let me make sure I emphasize this, that the governor did not make this decision in a vacuum. The governor not only did speak, as I alluded to in terms of his travels, but he also used economic data or labor statistic data from the Department of Commerce when the labor market numbers were coming out. And the analysis had showed that, job openings had skyrocketed. And in April, there were 9.3 million job openings nationally. So there are those types of statistics that the governor used through the Department of Labor, through the Department of Commerce. Granted, there are a lot of studies out there that go on one side and the other side in terms of the economics. That's just the nature of how this the debate is going. But I just want to make sure I emphasize that the governor did not do this in a vacuum.
Yeah, thank you for that. So here's the thing. There aren't actually studies right now on this particular issue that seem to go in both directions.
Well, you were alluding to some of the reports that you were saying, and so that's what I meant by studies.
So there's a difference between econometric studies that are done by economists who actually look at national data, not just trends, not just, oh, there's more jobs, so let's cut people off from benefits, but actually looking at what is the effect of these benefits on whether or not they affect the likelihood of people taking jobs. And what these two economic studies done by University of Chicago, by the way, not known as a bastion of liberal thinking, what these studies have found is that there actually isn't an impact on people taking the jobs, but there is a huge impact on the stimulatory effect to the economy. And my concern is that it's a very irresponsible decision to hand back 1.5 billion that could have such a stimulatory effect on the economy without actually knowing what the data says about whether that will affect people even taking those jobs. So I don't disagree that there's more jobs available. I don't disagree that there's challenges in getting people into those jobs. Some of that is related to childcare. There's multiple things that might be going on. But there doesn't seem to be any behavioral economics or macroeconomic analysis that suggests that this decision is going to help people get into those jobs. And my concern is, at what cost do you want to take that sort of partisan ideological point at a cost of 1.5 billion to the state? It just seems really dangerous. Second, I want to ask you about, as you're describing what it was that was considered, I'm wondering if you looked at all at legislative intent. So in House Bill 1002, we had directed the Department of Labor to look at all federal regulations and guidance that would expand access to unemployment benefits or reduce bureaucratic hurdles. And then by July 1, to put those practices into play. So the way that I read that is the legislature was clearly directing the Department of Labor to go in the expansive direction to maximize the amount of federal money that we were bringing into the state. And I'm just wondering if there was any consideration of that, if there was any discussion of that when this policy was being made in the governor's office.
Delegate, I'm going to still stand by the earlier statement I made in terms of, I'm not going to get into all the machinations or the meeting topics or the discussions that we had with the governor regarding this. However, I do know, as I said, that the governor did not do this in a vacuum. I would have to take exception to the fact that this was a partisan decision when you have the President of the United States making comments last week regarding this benefit and saying that it was the right of the governors to do just this, and we stand by that. But in terms of the debate back and forth, we'll just have to respectfully disagree in terms of the characterization you've said about the governor.
So we can disagree on whether or not it was partisan. I guess my question stands, which is on what sort of macroeconomic theory and research was it based on? And on what legislature, legislative direction. It seems that those two things were not in the mix. I heard you say that he looked at some Department of Commerce data. He talked to
the Department of Commerce data he was looking at is from the National Bureau of Labor Statistics coming from the federal government when the job numbers come out.
right.
Tell you what, guys, let me jump in. I know
thank you.
a lot of people that we're still waiting to hear from that had their hands up. I don't want to
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I don't want to drag, make it wait too much longer. Let me see those hands again. Let me switch back. Delegate Adams, Delegate Aarons, Delegate Pippy, and then Delegate Branch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to my colleague, I think the macroeconomic theory you're after is supply and demand. Right now you have more jobs out there than people looking for jobs. And in fact, and Secretary Robertson, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but because of that, you're seeing wages, bonuses being paid by private sector, higher hourly wages than what you saw in the past. This is the private sector macroeconomic effect of having supply and demand in place. And so, my question, frankly, gets right to this macro, theory, which is that as people are coming out of the pandemic looking for work, the monies that we're talking about that the state lost, it's not lost dollars, it's monies in the employers' checking accounts that they want to pay directly to their new prospective employees. That is the best and most direct way to get money to people, is to put them back on the payroll working. It is not to use UI for something that it was never intended for. And the question, with all that being said, and the macroeconomic theory being laid out, which is the problem that we have right now, we have too few people looking for work, too many jobs, is that people, I think, especially in government, have an opportunity to say to people looking for work, this is one of the best opportunities that we've seen in modern times to find wages that they want to be paid for the work that they want to do. So when you went into the conversation, and I really would like to get some thoughts about how well prepared the Department of Labor is to actually do this, which is how do we get people who are trying to find work now, who can't actually find the same exact job that they were working a year ago? And how is the state of Maryland training? How are we creating apprenticeship programs? And are we prepared for, I think what's going to happen, a lot of people calling your department, certainly our office, is not about UI and getting paid UI benefits, but rather, how is the state going to help me get retrained for these high-paying jobs for which there's scarcity? And, I'm in the construction trades, and I don't mind saying to you that my business would hire 10 more people tomorrow. And I know every business that's in construction up and down the line that we're in a severe shortage. And so these apprenticeship programs that you're speaking of, that you've talked about. This was a change in direction of the Department of Labor under, Kelly Schultz. Let me be blunt. This was a new direction to set these programs forward. And it seems like the department, if we're well prepared in finance, can actually address the supply and demand issue by giving people the training so they can take advantage of these very high paying, skilled jobs. And I'm anxious to hear your thoughts on sort of the rebuttal to the previous colleague, but also your thoughts on how well prepared we are to get these folks into really good paying jobs.
Thank you, Delegate Adams. I'd love to answer that question. First, I'm going to back up just for 1 second, because I did want to kind of add on to Kiefer Mitchell's response to the previous questions as well, to confirm and reassure you, Delegate Charkoudian and members of the committee, that the governor absolutely did not make this decision in a vacuum. And there is research on the other side, as well as the most important supply and demand argument that Delegate Adams just mentioned. I don't have everything at my fingertips, but I did want to mention a briefing that was prepared by the Cato Institute that quoted, despite increased job openings, labor supply constraints contributed to a continued disconnect between workers and opportunities. Some contacts said the prospective continuation of enhanced unemployment benefits created a disincentive to return to work. And that was in partnership with the Minneapolis Fed. There were stories like this across the country. And like I said, I don't have them all at my fingertips, but we certainly looked at every single situation that would benefit both our job seekers and our employers. So to Delegate Adams' question regarding supply and demand, in terms of being prepared, we have been preparing ourselves through the entire pandemic. Earlier in the spring and coming out of the winter, when the hospitality industry was still partially closed and having trouble reopening, we got really innovative and created all kinds of job fairs and resources for claimants. We did a whole series and kind of traveled them through the Eastern Shore, called the hospitality to healthcare, hospitality to retail, hospitality to cyber. We were taking folks who were out of jobs in the hospitality industry and were desiring training and skills and connections to other types of industries and jobs. And we would connect them with the employers that were willing to do that training. So some of those people have already entered the workforce in a new arena, but we are really proud to be working through our apprenticeship partners and our earn partners, our youth apprenticeship partners, to our job fairs and our American Job Centers and our veteran services, to look at the training and skills needed by industry and find those job seekers that are interested in learning those skills to be connected to those jobs. It is innovative, and we are going to forward to the committee following this hearing a one-pager that we have created that kind of lays out every workforce resource and opportunity that's available, with links for your own edification, and so that you can share that with job seekers and employers across our state. In terms of being prepared, we continue to watch all of the labor statistics numbers and listen to each jurisdiction's local workforce area in terms of the needs. We're so excited about that additional $75 million set aside for workforce training and apprenticeship. And we're working with all the local jurisdictions on how to make sure we get that to the people that need it most. So I do think we're prepared. We believe the jobs are available. We know our employers are grateful. Back to that supply and demand argument, we talk to employers every single day who are providing their own incentives, increasing wages and providing hiring bonuses to get these job seekers to come in and stay on the job so that they can keep their doors open.
It is an exciting opportunity for those that can take advantage of this new workforce opportunity. And thank you for that, Secretary.
You're welcome.
Delegate Ahrens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, for being here. I guess a lot of what I wanted to talk about has been touched on, but I wanted to congratulate you, Secretary Robinson, on some of the things that the state's trying to do. And I will argue, I come from a very rural district, Kent, Queen Anne, Cecil, and Caroline, I don't have the big businesses that a lot of these other districts do have. And I'm a past restaurant owner, and I do see the problems we're incurring in with this industry in particular. And I see the bonuses and I see the pluses and what's lacking out there. And I think whether we can talk about this $1.5 billion, we have to look at what this is actually doing to the businesses and the economies in my district and on the shore. If you look at Ocean City, when you can't staff people, these are serious, serious issues for businesses. When you're walking out on checks, people can't get service, people can't get this. I think the economic impact is even bigger than we care to imagine. I just want to touch a little bit on the dollars and cents for the businesses, and have to understand that a lot of these businesses have suffered greatly to where every dime that they put in their pockets and they saved, they've already spent that plus the money they were able to get from the federal government, the state. And I think what's paramount here is we really have to start looking at these. This might be $1.5 billion, but this is also dollars. These are tax dollars. These are dollars that are coming from all of us. And while the federal government can write a blank check, they seem to be able to print money rapidly. We don't have that same ability here in my district or even in Maryland. And I would really be interested also in how much information we glean from the small business community, because when we start looking at federal government, state government, those really have not suffered layoffs. They've not suffered in this vein. The people that are really suffering are these small businesses. And I think we need to reinvent ourselves in so many ways. You can't go back to the job you had before, but certainly there's an opportunity to build. But I just wanted to thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Delegate.
Delegate Pippy. Sorry, hold on, Delegate Pippy. Delegate Aarons, were you making a statement, or did you want Secretary Robinson to respond?
I thought she was going to thank me, and I appreciate that, but she couldn't. But no, if you want to respond, Secretary, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I was absolutely going to say thank you. And thank you, Chairman Davis, for giving me the opportunity to show my gratitude for the recognition of the positive things that have happened. It has been a rough year. No one could have predicted or expected what we have faced at the Department of Labor. But and continuing what I was talking about before, we represent job seekers and employers. And so we are listening to both sides, and we have been doing that for the through the entire pandemic. And we believe that now is the time. And we're happy to have the governor's leadership to be able to connect all of our claimants and job seekers back into the workforce to actually provide what our businesses need right now.
I'm sorry, now let me go to Delegate Pippy, and then Delegate Branch, and Palaria, and Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I heard a couple comments that I just wanted to briefly touch on. One was obviously public policy, and we were looking to understand what the administration's policy perspective was. And then I heard, partisan ideology. And I just want to say, I can't imagine it's only one political party's platform to getting people employed. And I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but, a year ago, when this pandemic was here, the state government stepped in and put a lot of restrictions on businesses, how many people they could have, how many people that could visit, and it forced a lot of people out of work. Hence, what created the need for enhanced unemployment benefits, because people didn't have the opportunity in many cases to work. I would imagine as those metrics get better and those opportunities come back and people have the option of working, that those enhanced benefits would be reduced as far as a public policy perspective. And that's what we're seeing. And so to me, in my community in Frederick, I went to one of the most busiest restaurants we have, which is Glory Days in a very popular area. They can't hire employees. And it's just, when I'm talking with citizens, it was mentioned about reports and macroeconomics and all these other things. In my community, I can't go a day without hearing from an employer or a local business that is having difficulty finding employees. And it's not because of safety precautions. It's not because of lack of work. It's because there's an incentive for folks to not work. And so from a public policy perspective, I would imagine we want to incentivize people to get back to work because that's what we do. And I think that's a good thing. And so I applaud the administration for adapting to what the environment is now, which is as the metrics improve with the pandemic, and there's more.
Hold on, Delegate Pippy. We got to get Delegate Turn, thank you.
Yeah, I was on a roll. Again, I want to applaud the administration for this decision because at some point, less is more. If you're incentivizing people not to work when there is a need for employees, we're going to have other problems. And I just wanted to make that point. So thank you.
All right, Delegate Branch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I applaud the administration as well. You're doing some good stuff. But at the same time, I am still having a very large issue with the UI benefits. I don't know what the problem is, and by now, I would think that the department would have a better control. And I don't know if any other members are still experiencing those problems, but I'm still having trouble with people if they can't get through. They have trouble with their bank cards, not receiving payments. I can get them through sometimes, or they'll get through. We'll think the issue's resolved, and then the ball is dropped, and we end up being right back where we started. And I don't know if Keith, I'm going to call you Delegate Mitchell, but
Once a delegate, always a delegate.
Can remember. If we can remember, I was just recently over this past session at the Lieutenant Governor and Governor's office about the same issue. I cannot seem to get away from so many calls.
I'm going to, Delegate, if you don't mind.
Today.
If you delegate, if you don't mind, I'm going to turn that over to Secretary Robinson and her team to go through those operational issues.
Of course, I will touch on a couple of them for you, Delegate Branch, and then I'm happy to let my Assistant Secretary, who oversees the Division of Unemployment Insurance, weigh in, because she has experienced this as hard as anyone. We also talk to claimants and constituents every single day. As I mentioned before, we could not, no state in the nation could have been prepared for this type of pandemic. We had weeks of over 100,000 claims being filed per week, when back in the Great Recession, the highest number of claims that were ever filed in a week was 6,000. It's just, it's apples to oranges what we're facing. It's historical, and no UI program has ever experienced this before. In addition, we implemented 10 brand new federal unemployment insurance programs and added hundreds of thousands of customers into our system that had never been eligible for benefits before. And those federal programs have new and changing requirements, and they overlap with programs, and a claimant sometimes bounces back and forth between eligibility of which programs, which triggers issues on their claim. So some claimants might have multiple issues to be adjudicated throughout the life of their claim. It's not, they must file a weekly certification and redetermine their eligibility every single week. We've hired over 2,000
Madam Secretary,
Department of Labor.
I hate to interrupt you, but I'm talking about very poor people in the district that I represent. A lot of them not looking for some of the more extensive sorts of programs that you're offering from the federal level. They're trying to get the basic benefit that's owed to them because they're no longer working. I'm trying to get them money that they haven't received in months. And so I'm just trying to figure out what was the problem. And if, in fact, did we make a bad decision in moving to this beacon system, or I don't understand that.
I understand your concern. We didn't have a choice in terms of transitioning to a new system. Our old legacy system could never have handled the volume that has come during this pandemic. We also didn't have a choice because we asked for an extension from the federal government on that contract to launch that new system, and we're not granted that extension. So we do believe it was a good decision because our claimants wouldn't be able to get their claims processed. And I will reiterate that 97% of the 1.8 million claims that have been filed during the pandemic have been processed. So I'm going to let my Assistant Secretary, Dana Freeman, kind of explain some of the other complex reasons why on any given day, a regular UI claimant or others has trouble and has issues that are triggered in their claim process.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Good afternoon, everyone. I wanted to address Delegate Branch's, I guess, central question about your constituents not being able to communicate with us. So over the course of the pandemic, where we prior to had the phone as the primary way for constituents to communicate with us, we've had to create a number of different omni-channels. And so we have the virtual assistant, we have the Salesforce tool, we have the mobile app, and we can always get better in educating our customers on the variety of different ways for them to reach us when that traditional way is not working for them. And we kind of had to create those omni-channels in the context of flying a plane while building it last year. And so we're getting better and better at and evolving on how we are delivering our communications and our customer service to our constituents who have grown accustomed to being serviced through the phone. Each claimant, every time they file, every week, creates potential opportunity for issues to present. And that would then require them to interface with us. So with the federal programs allowing claimants to not usually have that traditional 26 weeks of benefits, claimants don't make me add wrong, but I think we've extended these programs to 70, 77 weeks that claimants can be on benefits where these potential issues can be created. So so your constituents, every one of them is case by case, and everyone uniquely has something going on with their claims. For those claims that have issues, the vast majority of our claims are being processed without issue. That we will get better in educating and publicizing the omni-channels available for your claimants to be serviced. I think that's what I have to say.
You have to be able to reach and share with people so they will know those different avenues.
That's what I say. That's where
out to you if you're flying the plane and building it at the same time. So anyway, for the sake of time, I know there's some other members with questions, but I'll talk to you offline.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Delegate Impalaria, then Delegate Watson, and Madam Vice Chair. If you're talking, Delegate Impalaria, your mic's muted.
Wasn't letting me unmute. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you. And thank you for giving us the information, Ms. Robinson. You answered a lot of my questions. I do 100% agree that once the pot of money is smaller, so will the amount of fraud be smaller. There have been a lot of thanks to this administration and that administration. Actually, the people that I want to thank are the businesses that struggled to stay open, kept their doors open, and are now providing jobs because despite the great hardships put on them, they're still open and they're willing to employ people, which unfortunately, because of the incentive money, they haven't been able to do. And that really has nothing to do with you. So the thank you to the government. I think the government created the problems, didn't make them better. The problem that I've heard from businesses and from constituents is not everyone has a computer. When can we go back to some sort of in-person venting of these issues? When can some of these people actually meet with someone from UI and say, these are my issues, why can't I collect my money? Why do they have to go through the computer? I understand that probably 90% of them can, but there's a percent of them that cannot. And the other complaint that I'm receiving is from employers saying, why are you paying unemployment claims to people who, number one, don't deserve them, and number two, who are still working for me? So you're right. There is more than one type of fraud. And I do believe one of the ways that you cut down on the fraud is in person. And if you just sent out that computer blip, oh, by the way, we're looking at your claim. We're not really sure about that. You'll have to appear at the MVA in front of one of our agents next week at 3 o'clock. I bet 90% of them wouldn't appear and that claim would go away. And I know some of those fraudulent claims are coming through us, through my staff, and getting sent to you because they've learned that there's a better chance of them collecting the fraud if they get us to help them. So that's my biggest two questions right there is, one, when can some of these people actually work with someone in person? And two, when are employers going to have the right, the hearings to say this person shouldn't be collecting unemployment at all? Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Impalaria. I'm sure that my Assistant Secretary, Dana Freeman, has really great answers for that. And I think she probably will explain it better than I would. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
And good to see you, Dana.
Good to see you. I'm going to take your questions in reverse because the first one about in-person would be something that UI jurisdictions throughout the country hasn't done in like 2 decades. With the
maybe it's time.
Right.
Old school,
So
maybe it's time.
We would have to
the guy in China
effectuate.
and the guy in Russia aren't showing up to the in-person interview. So we'll cut them out immediately.
So to your point of employers getting their benefit charge statements and seeing where these employees either didn't work for me from identity theft or are working for me. You may not want to hear that, but that system is working. That's the checks and balances. That's what we're going to be relying on July 4th, when it's just regular UI applicants who have wages. And the check and balances, whenever there's an application that's filed, we're going out to that employer to verify it. A separation statement goes to that employer. Right now, with the PUA claimants or the independent contractors, there's no independent verification coupled with their being able to just self-certify that I work, that's driving the fraud. Now, any employer that on their benefit charge statement sees where that employee was working for me, or there is a process, they protest it. No employer will be ever charged for any employee that was not in their employ. And we have a protest. Now they can go online through Beacon, either protest it. We will then from there, if they don't like us not removing it, then they can have a review determination. Then after that, there's levels of review to address that. No employer will ever be charged or held responsible for any benefits that don't apply to any employees in their employ. So
and I agree with that. The problem is the inability of them to be properly notified person, and them then being able to properly get in touch with the right parties to make sure it doesn't happen. And that's the calls and complaints that I've received, that, you know, my employee is collecting unemployment now. I was never notified. I've tried to get through. I can't get through. And they say, oh, and guess who the employee is? I'm like, well, of course it's you. You own the company. It would be you. And they say, you're exactly right. It's me. It's me. Someone has fraudulently filed that I've been fired from my job at my company that I own, and they're collecting benefits. And so that's why I say some of this in person, and I'm not saying, 70%, I'm not saying, 50%, but, 5 to 10% should be allowed to go back to in person at request. Not everybody is computer literate. Not everybody can use these systems. I think it's very discriminatory, especially like Delegate Branch was saying to his constituents who may not have access to the internet. There should be a way that can happen. And there's businesses that are in areas that there is no internet. So, and obviously if a person is running a business out of his truck, then he may not have internet in that truck. So I think going forward, we look at a way to have some in-person for those people who are challenged at using the beacon system, and there should be a way to do that. And I don't think that's hard. I don't think it's impossible. You know, it could be just one day a week in each county at an MVA where you set an appointment up and you can go in person. You don't even need new offices for that. So I do think that this one size fits all does not work. We've seen that because the fraud, I have to say, Hartford County Courthouse was 100% just hit by the fraud. And people I know personally all were unemployed from the courthouse, even though they're working every single day. And I got to say that the state and the court system said they weren't responsible for it one bit. But just funny how all the court employees at the same time were hacked. So I guess they were all individually hacked through individual systems, and it came, you know, that UI claims were filed that they were unemployed. So, you know, these people want to pick up the phone and talk to a person. They really do. And when, as you know, when that person commits fraud, he's not using your address. He's using some other address. So you don't even know it's happening to you. That's catching it. I understand. Well, I guess the number we've talked about what the numbers are. I'd like to know what you believe. You don't have to answer me now. What you believe the fraud that slipped by you, and there's no way you could catch it all with these numbers you're talking about. I'm just curious what that number is that has slipped by you, and I wouldn't say it's in the millions. I would say it's probably in the billions, and our employees are going to have to pay that back. So.
Delegate, if I may, just to kind of provide a closing response to all your comments, we certainly will take everything that you have suggested under advisement. And we already are looking into ways we roll out, you know, limited ability for in-person appointments for very specific unemployment insurance issues. So we're working on that kind of study now and seeing what can be done. So we'll take that under advisement. I want to tell you that while we know that fraud will be reduced with the ending of the federal enhanced programs, we will also have a much greater capacity to serve every single customer in our system and address the backlog of all the issues. So this goes to Delegate Branch's comment as well. You know, starting in July, we will have more capacity with all of the additional hires in our system to get through the backlog faster and address every single claimant's issues. It's very difficult to try and keep up with the large number of new claims that continues to be filed, the large number of issues that are created every week when we're working with so many different programs, you know, federal and state. So I just wanted to make that comment because we do believe there's a light at the end of the tunnel for our customers to be fully serviced and have the customer service they deserve by our department, but also for a reduction in calls and complaints to your offices as well.
And just one last thing, I guarantee you're having the same trouble hiring employees that everybody else is.
Yes.
So realize that's yes. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Employer. Delegate, I'm sorry, Ms. Freeman.
I wanted to share, Secretary mentioned that we just awarded to LexisNexis our identity verification vendor to help us bridge that gap you were talking about, where we will require claimants, and we have an employer side to virtually show themselves while we are considering how they can come in person to see if that's who they say they are. And they have a lot of other tools to get at whether or not that identity is real.
Right. And thank you both for showing up for work every day. And thank the employees who show up for work every day, because not everyone is. So thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Employer. Delegate Watson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been a good discussion. I appreciate the people from the administration that have come to talk about where you are in the decisions with the governor. And I also appreciate both sides of the issue, listening to Delegate Pippi be as passionate as he is in the public policy, and also Delegate Charkoudian, who we all know has a PhD in economics from Johns Hopkins. So she has some level of knowledge about the macroeconomic policy of this. But within those two opposites of the spectrum, I would think that we could all agree that there are some people who have unemployment benefits that may be accepting benefits when they are able to work. So yes, there are some people that probably the benefits need to stop and they need to be encouraged to get out there and search for work. So reinstating the search requirements definitely makes sense and probably should have been done earlier. But on the other hand, we also know the pandemic's not over, that children still are not vaccinated, and that adults have to adjust to care for children in a variety of situations, different hardship situations that are caused by the pandemic. And so just as Delegate Impalaria said, it's not one size fits all for the issue he was talking about. This strikes me as something that is not one size fits all, but the decision is being made that way. It was abrupt. It has a very short off-ramp, and it does nothing to address the disproportionate impact on women who are primary caregivers for children who are impacted by the pandemic and are not vaccinated. So, understanding that the governor is trying to do what he thinks is best for the entire state, I hope that you will take back to him and ask him to consider how we would make this a better decision for everyone. Perhaps a longer off-ramp, perhaps an appeal process, or applying criteria that would protect disproportionately impacted people who have a legitimate need, particularly because it's federal funds that are helping these people, not state funds. There are people that will be hurt by this, and why can't we figure out who they are and make a policy that protects them and their families and their children? So I would think, in 2021, we would have the technology and the ability to apply the governor's decision in a way that provides equitable solution for people who truly have need. So I hope that you will think about, and I think there's still time to make adjustments in that vein. And I hope that you will ask the governor to consider that. Moving on to a couple of specific questions about UI benefit issues and problems that we have trouble with on getting answers to. Sometimes we have people that tell us all of a sudden their weeks available for filing just stop. The next week doesn't pop up and there's no message as to why. And they don't see any way to ask that question through the system. Is that accurate?
So we do have an internal within Beacon for customers to communicate with staff.
Okay, so they can.
We didn't have it initially when we went live in September. So
okay,
that's one avenue.
Okay, so is there any reason why weeks would just automatically stop?
No, we could put a flag on some weeks if we're our identity, a security, suspicious activity protocols. That would stop the weeks until we shore up that person is valid. Now, when we have enhanced, as we've learned more about bad actors, what those security protocols are. When we started with the pandemic, we didn't have those. Now, a lot of, so claimants had been filing and maybe we hadn't applied those security protocols to that particular claimant. But at this point, I'm speculating, I would have to see what, that particular claimant's situation.
So we can send that to you guys. The other last issue is on direct deposit. We I believe passed legislation that made direct deposit an option for people receiving benefits, and I was happy to see that implemented. but I didn't expect you to take away or change midstream those that were using the debit card successfully. My understanding is now they have to stop using that. They have to file for the direct deposit, and it'll be switched sort of midstream on them. So I was wondering, how have the direct deposit signups been going? What percentage of people have completed that verification for direct deposit? And do you anticipate any confusion when you move from the debit card to direct deposit?
Want me to take it, Tiff?
Sure, yes, please.
So we are extremely excited about our transitioning from one bank vendor to the other with two new payment methods than the one that we've been using previously for a decade, debit card. So prior to our transition, which we did on May 28th, we gave claimants 3 weeks lead time to elect which payment method they wanted. And just about everyone responded. We gave them several times to elect and select. And with that initial transition activity, we had, say, 85% of claimants elect direct deposit and about 15% elect manual checks. We communicated with those about the debit card and when your last benefit payment will be issued on that, and that you had to make that election to your new payment method so that your benefits would not be delayed. Now, anyone who has any money on their debit card have until, let's say I don't have the dates, but mid-July to pull that money off, maybe even August, and we will be notifying claimants to withdraw the money from the debit card. But every claimant had the opportunity, and still does, to elect a new payment method. And I think at that last week, we were saying, you got one more day, you haven't elected, but it was very responsive. And of course, we took those, we verified the bank accounts and all of that through their institutions. And so I say claimants were adequately notified about the cessation of the debit card and transition onto direct deposit.
If I may add to that, for you, Delegate Watson, we had the Bank of America vendor was under a contract with the state treasurer's office. And Bank of America made an announcement at the end of 2020, as did many other banking vendors across the country, that they were getting out of the debit card business, primarily due to the fraud that they had experienced. So as you could imagine, debit cards, if someone is using a false identity and files a claim, and a debit card gets immediately in the federal programs approved based on their estimates, and sent in the mail, sometimes that debit card then gets stolen, or they take the initial money and don't file again. And we determine, after the fact, when we're doing the proof of income, as is required by the federal government within 21 days of filing, we then would discover that it was a fraudulent claim, but the money had already gone out on the card, or had been, stolen or grabbed from a mailbox. We had a lot of those issues. And therefore, Bank of America had already made the announcement that they were no longer going to continue that business. So we certainly are not opposed in the future to looking into a potential RFP to add that payment once the federal programs end and fraud is back to a normal.
Yeah. So you basically had no choice, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, that's not true. It was something that we thought was the benefit of our customer. So we were already working down that track
to get rid of the debit
to direct deposit. Many other states offer direct deposit, and we wanted to do that as well because it's a safer way for our customers to receive their benefits.
We wanted you to do direct deposit as well, and that was a big push early on. But I guess are you telling me you didn't have any choice but to end the debit cards when you did?
That's correct.
So that's the answer to the question. You didn't have a choice. You had to transition off the debit card because of the provider. Is that correct?
It's the reason we had been looking since pre-pandemic at a direct deposit option. So
Right.
yes, when Bank of America announced they were no longer continuing the debit cards, we opted to go with a specific direct deposit option and not include a debit card, with the idea of potentially including that later when the federal programs are over and there's less fraud.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So I have a question, and I want to go back to the fraud issue. And just by way of background, curiously, yesterday, I'm on as part of my law practice, and I think this picks up what Delegate Wilson was talking about at the beginning, and certainly some of what Delegate Ampalaria said. So I'm on a listserv of family law attorneys that has over 3,000 across the state. And as it happened, on the listserv, the issue came up, and it happened to be an attorney who has a small practice in my same office complex. And out of frustration, sort of said off topic, obviously it wasn't about family law, he says, I don't know what to do. You know, I've had an unemployment claim filed under my name, suggesting that I'm not working. He's a partner in the firm. And he said, I have tried every which way to contact the department. I have Federal Express things there. So I replied to him offline that I would follow up and sort of see what I could find out and determine who we needed to talk to. After that, there were no less than 10 additional attorneys on the listserv that talked about the same problem, and they all had great suggestions. Some went directly to the AG's office, and apparently there are 2 people in the AG's office that were helping them. Others, talked about the computer system, but all of them said they weren't getting any response from the department. One individual said she, on 3 different occasions, got 7 UI claims sent to her as the employer of a total of 21 people who never worked for her. So if you could perhaps explain, I have 2 questions. One, who and how does an employer or even not an employer, someone that is simply receives information that they allegedly filed a UI claim, who do they call or what do they do? And then second, maybe explain a little further what LexisNexis is going to do as far as how it might help reduce fraud. I mean, I realize you're saying when the federal program's over, that'll help, but this is, I was amazed. And the listserv is still talking about it today. And so I just want to be able to provide some answers to sort of how do they indicate that there's been a fraudulent claim filed in their name? And if and why there's no response, or who they could call or talk to if they've not gotten a response to multiple letters. They talked about trying to go on Beacon and do things and haven't been able to figure it out. I have to admit, I haven't gone on, so I couldn't tell you whether it's clear or not. But again, the fraud piece is very concerning, and particularly based on this little wave that occurred on this 3,000 member listserv.
It is. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I will let Dana elaborate, but I will tell you that I'm not actually surprised. Fraudsters, oftentimes when they are seeking out or using identities, they have ways of hitting the owner or top earner in companies, because that will it gives them a better chance of trying to fraudulently receive the top weekly benefit amount. And so we, during this pandemic, created an entire employer call center, which did not exist before. We created all kinds of resources through Beacon with an employer portal, but also ways that they can report this type of fraud. We previously shared with leadership at the General Assembly an entire employer research page. So if you don't have that, we are happy to follow up and make sure you get that one pager as well with all
that would be great.
And phone numbers. But I'll let Dana add anything I missed specific to employers.
So yeah, I would say the contact ways that they can reach us, we have on our website, and we have the one pager. And any of your colleagues, you can rest assured they will not be responsible for any fraudulent activity on on their statements. We also, in Beacon, if they haven't visited Beacon, the first time they do visit, they would have to do an activation before they could go in and see what's going on with their account. And our employer call center can help with that. So they may be thinking they can't even get into Beacon, but if they never activated an account, that would be a hurdle. So we would make sure everybody's activated. And then if you're in there, you can, that employer can do a protest and say, these employees, don't work for me.
It would be great if you could, if someone can send, whether you send it to our committee staff or whomever, the one pager, that would be terrific. And to be honest, I'll post it on the listserv so that maybe some of these attorneys that are having the issues will then have a direct information as to how to make the report or whatever. And unfortunately, I did respond to the entire listserv and told them about the hearing today and that I would try and find information. So I'm sure I will be hearing from them. But my final question is, if payments have been made fraudulently, can you tell us what the process is for the department to try and get those funds back, whether state or federal, but certainly state, which is your jurisdiction?
Absolutely. We have a benefit payment control unit whose sole reason for being is to investigate payments that went to recipients that shouldn't have received it for a variety of reasons. And we have investigators to look at all of the payments to make sure we've made proper payments as opposed to overpayments. That unit also, when they establish that someone received a payment that should not have, we have recovery mechanisms and collection to get that payment back into the trust fund if it was from regular UI program, or back into the federal coffers if it was a federal one. So that's when you hear Madam Secretary talk about us owning integrity. We are always on the hunt. We have a unit that sole thing is to make sure the payments that we're making are proper, because we are stewards of the trust fund for Maryland employers' tax receipts. So we have a fiduciary obligation to make sure what goes out of those funds are going to the proper recipient. So so I will look in at, just like I had mentioned earlier, with claimants being able to, within Beacon, send a message to staff. That functionality has been put in there for employers.
Okay.
And that's been maybe a month or two ago. So
right. That's helpful. I'll relay that. And then finally, yeah, I think you said LexisNexis was granted the contract just a few weeks ago. Is that correct? And exactly what is it that the contract is for?
So we, as part of our integrity, we own integrity, needed an outfit to help us be 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps ahead of the bad actors. And so we procured it. And LexisNexis will be able to help us verify these identities. Now, if you know the constituents now who, if we see suspicious activity from our internal protocols we have on the system, we ask those claimants to provide additional documentation. You all are familiar with that, right?
Right.
So LexisNexis tools can take that same information and they can ping out to all different, we ping out to Social Security Administration, but
Sure.
Bad actors have stolen valid Social Security information, it makes that pass. LexisNexis has tentacles in all different types of agencies and operate, like Department of Motor Vehicle, even banking institutions. And so they're going to let us know whether this person is who they say they are. They're going to look at IP addresses. They're going to be doing algorithms on whether 10 people have filed from this same address. They're going to utilize information they have from being in the business for 30 years. And if that doesn't satisfy them, they still don't, they'll assign risk factors to each of these things. And if that applicant is even riskier, they'll take up the verification methods, which would include this live, you better show me who you are or you can't get past.
Okay.
That's what we're expecting and looking forward to having now to help us combat this, because this identity verification as a type of fraud is a new phenomenon for the program.
Okay, thank you. That was helpful. And I do see a few more questions. I believe Senator Klaasmeyer, you had a question? And you're on mute.
No, there, it's off. I just want to thank everyone for all their questions. I have to scoot off, and I appreciate being a guest in Economic Matters, and very good questions and very thoughtful questions. And I appreciate Secretary Robinson and Kiefer. But Kiefer, one thing I have to ask you, and I've asked Secretary Robinson this favor to get the governor to come and answer my phone sometimes. Maybe you could come too, huh?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. It's those phones just keep ringing and the emails just don't keep coming. So, and I'll see everybody later.
Thank you, Senator Klaasmeyer. It was delightful to have you.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right, take care. Delegate Charkoudian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to hold off on my lecture on econometric analysis and the difference between that and surveys.
Okay.
I'm just going to ask one more specific question, sort of building on some of the last set of questions. I'm just reviewing a set of emails that came in from all of our colleagues, many of whom wish they could be here themselves and other committees. And we just continue to have cases that are sort of these perennial, people are nearly homeless, people don't have food, they still don't have money from 6 months ago. And I heard a lot of different responses to Delegate Branch's comments about that, about there's this possibility and that possibility, a lot of reasons of why it's challenging. But the bottom line is our offices still have caseloads that range between, I don't know, 30 and in some offices, 75, 100 of people that we have been working with. I mean, in my office, we have a handful from last summer. We have people who are stuck in Arizona from 3 months ago because their payments got cut off and we can't seem to sort out what the issue is. We're not getting anywhere. I literally had somebody say to me, why does the department want you to be the go-between? And I'm like, the department doesn't want me to be the go-between, but you keep coming to me because the department's not responding to you. And can you give us a concrete, specific thing that we can do for these people that we have been working with for months and months and months, who we know personally, we know it's not fraud, but we can't seem to get it unstuck. And they are really suffering right now.
Delegate Charkoudian, I would ask you to please refer those constituents to the case manager that we have assigned to their case, because we have a system in place with another partner, Salesforce, to provide customer relationship management, to allow our staff that has been hired to work with your constituents directly and work with our internal adjudication team, fraud team. They have the connection to be able to escalate and work those claims, internally, so that we can then report. We are providing weekly reports to each of your offices. We continue to revise the methods to assist you. Back early in the pandemic, your offices asked that we message claimants directly on behalf of your offices to let all of your constituents know that we had received your claim issue from their legislator, and therein from there going forward, unfortunately your claimants found a path to come through your offices. This is a volume issue more than anything else, and like I said, as we can get back to a capacity to handle every single claimant, we'll get through this a lot faster. Pre-pandemic, we didn't have any unemployment insurance complaints. Everyone could get their call answered and issues resolved within the federal standards. So
I'm not clear that I know what exactly to say. So if they say to me, they're not hearing back from their case manager, they haven't heard anything in 4 months, what is it that you want me to tell them?
They hear from their case managers at least once a week. Some of their claims are complex and require multiple interviews with multiple employers in their base period. They may have benefits being received in other states. I might let Dana add to my list of why this is so complex. It's hard to explain when there's so many different issues that can arise on every individual's claim. So when you make a general statement about a list of 30 or 70 claimants that have issues, I can't tell you what's wrong with each claim without looking at it, but Dana might have more insight.
So depending upon what program your constituent is on, dictates the type of issues that may take longer to resolve. So if it's a PUA claimant, which is independent contractor, or self-employed, who initially filed their claim by self-certifying all the information is true. Am I on mute? Y'all can hear me?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, all right, I'm just, sorry. But the US DOL's required us now to have more proof from PUA claimants. You got to now prod your proof of employment or your proof of income. If we gotten to that, then there may be an issue where before there was not, because PUA claimants kind of get paid first, and then we go settle up to see to verify everything on the back end. If it's a banking issue, we had some stuff with BOA, I think you all are familiar with, where I guess all the institutions, all the players in unemployment started taking up their security efforts, and BOA, I guess, established a global crimes unit where we would clear payments, and then they would on the back end stop the payment because of whatever efforts they were looking at. And we, like the Dickens, couldn't get those issues lifted from they wouldn't even tell us the reasons. We know there's some claimants that were caught up in that with us transitioning to Wells Fargo, we think that's rectified. But it was a long stretch where a lot of those issues that could not be resolved, our hands were held and tied because it was other stakeholders. And I'm not passing the blame. So I would have to, so that's for PUA. For regular UI, go ahead, you had a question?
No, I was just going to say, I know it's close to our ending time, and I have heard all the challenges. I just want to give you the feedback. Maybe this is the most helpful thing. I'm getting texts literally while we're talking from people who are saying, people in my constituents are not hearing from their case manager on a weekly basis with information. So I need to share that with you. I don't know what you're going to do about it, but that just is not the case for our folks. So I appreciate there's a lot of different pieces. I don't want to hold everyone here, too late walking through them all. But even that piece about someone calling on a weekly basis saying, here's where we are, here's what we need from you. At least for several hundred people, we can tell you that's not happening. Maybe it just happens to be all the folks who are calling our offices, but I'm getting texts and emails from folks who are saying that's not happening for my constituents, and I can tell you it's not happening for the ones in District 20. So maybe there's something you can do.
We're going to take one more question because we appreciate the Secretary, Deputy Secretary, and Mr. Mitchell, our former Delegate Mitchell, staying longer than I think they anticipated. Delegate Fennell, you have the last question. And you're muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As Lord Delegate Shakudi just said, we're in the same boat in the 47th district. One of the things I don't understand, I'm getting emails stating that unemployment has been escalated, and then they're receiving answers from 6 different handlers, and I don't know what that means, meaning that they're not getting any information. I know you guys assign us a district person, but you just need to know also down in the 47A, down in 47B in our district, they're not getting any response. And that's all I wanted to say. So if we can follow up, and if I can get a telephone number and I can follow up and have a conversation with you offline, I really appreciate it. If you can put your number in the chat, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, and with that, actually, just on behalf of the committee, want to thank certainly Secretary Robinson, who has been sort of in the line of fire for so long, and we appreciate all of your hard work. You're correct, this was a completely unprecedented situation, and even with complaints, we know that you worked very hard to try and address things, and same goes for Deputy Secretary Freeman, and it's always nice to see you, Kiefer. With that, I am going to close the briefing today and thank the committee members for their time as well. And hopefully we'll see everybody soon and maybe even, God forbid, in person. So everybody have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye.